Hello, I hope it's working. Hi, Kaz. Hello, how are you this morning? Thank you for joining me. Hello, happy Friday, everybody. I hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time visiting, well, hello there. Thank you so much for stopping by. I very much appreciate you spending your valuable time at my little channel. How was your week, everybody? I hope it was excellent. If it wasn't, I am really very sorry. So let's hang out together, spend some quality time. Yeah, it's crazy hair day, isn't it? I like to shake it up a bit. In case you're wondering why I have an L plate hanging in the background, I'm actually just a learner streamer. And I'm not going to take it off till I reach 500 subs. Hey, Jody. Hi. G'day, JP. Thanks for joining me. Hi, Dylan. How you going? I don't make the rules. The L plate just has to stay, Kaz said. So I hope the stream's going okay. If it's not, let me know, because I've been having a few problems this morning, a few technical problems. So let me know. G'day, Keely. Nice to see you this morning. And so let me know if it's not going good, because our internet has been totally crap this week. So today we're going to talk about Australia's colonial history, and almost everybody knows that starts with penal colonies. Between 1788 and 1868, more than 162,000 convicts were transported to Australia. Of these, about 7,000 arrived in 1833 alone. The convicts were transported as punishment for crimes committed in mostly Britain and Ireland. But if they survived the harsh life of a convict, when they'd served their sentences, most stayed on and some became extremely successful settlers. G'day, Ed. It's so nice to see US folks here. That's lovely. Transportation as a form of criminal punishment emerged in the British legal system from the early 19th century as an alternative to execution. Many crimes that today would have been considered pretty minor offences were punishable by hanging back then, and there were 225 identified capital offences at the time, meaning that there was no shortage of folk to transport to the colonies that was sometimes known as hell on earth. Sending convicts to Australia was seen as a solution to the problem of the abrupt halt of convict transportation to America with the American Revolutionary War. So with independence, America just stopped accepting convicts from Britain. So transportation from Britain to America ceased between 1776 and 1788. And then, of course, it's not like crime stopped, because it was difficult to live then. So the rapidly growing prison population was housed on ship hulks anchored in rivers along the coastline of southern England, floating prisons. How awful. That wasn't a solution. The hulks quickly became disease-ridden, with 1/3 of all prisoners dying while on board these ships. Initially, the plan was for the Australian colony to be an asylum for British loyalists who wanted to leave the newly independent America. However, in the late 1700s, I believe it was Lord Sydney, made orders that were issued by the British government for the creation of a penal colony in New South Wales. The whole of Australia was New South Wales back then. Convicts were mainly from England and Wales, with a large contingent of Irish. That was about 24%, and a much smaller percentage of Scots, 5%. But there were people from all over. Most were sentenced in the cities of Britain, where the displaced rural populations had struggled to survive in an increasingly industrialized world, so like Luddites and things like that. Rates of theft increased as people stole food and clothing and other minor items, and a conviction for robbery of just even the smallest thing could result in transportation for 7 years. About 20% of those convicted were female, and a small proportion of convicts were political prisoners. So today I wanted to share with you 5 great historical accounts from our convict history. From daring but failed escape attempts to 300 female convicts mooning in front of the governor at a church service. I hope these historical tidbits entertain you as much as they did for me when I stumbled upon them. I'll just say g'day to the chat. G'day, Lambo. Hi, Stephen Webb. Do you know, I only just got your joke from yesterday. I'm a bit slow on the uptake with jokes. I'm glad you. Hey, Lurker. It's nice to see you. Okay, the first guy on our list is John Caesar, and he was actually our first bushranger. I hope I'm pronouncing everything correctly. If I'm not, I do apologize. John Caesar was born in the West Indies, and he fled to England to escape plantation slavery. Ironically, he soon found himself transported to Australia on the First Fleet, where he once more faced a life of slavery. John was a huge man. There's accounts that he was born in Mauritius, and the small rations of the colony compelled him to steal in order to sustain his huge frame. He was described, though, as the hardest working convict in the whole colony. G'day, Daz. It was noted that his frame was muscular and well calculated for labour, but they complained that he kept stealing food from the other convicts, and his appetite was described by his jailers as ravenous. John escaped for the first time on the 29th of April, 1789. And a fortnight after being charged with theft, John Caesar, described as, these are their words, not mine, an incorrigibly stubborn black, he bolted with some provisions, an iron pot and a soldier's musket. Then garden robberies became frequent in the area. It was written, and this is a quote, that Caesar stole a musket from Abraham Hand, a Marine, and took to the bush. However, any intention he had of living off the land was soon abandoned because of the scarcity of game. Instead, he began prowling around the outskirts of the settlement with a loaded musket, stealing what food he could find. On the night of June the 6th, he was caught by a convict named Saltmarsh while attempting to steal some food, I think from a work gang. It was then decided that he should be sent to Garden Island there to work in fetters because he couldn't be trusted. And in addition to his ration of provisions, he was going to be given some special rations. He was going to be supplied with extra vegetables from the garden. So big was his appetite. He was a big man, though. John Caesar escaped a second time in December 1789. Now, Caesar surrendered in this second escape only a week and a half after absconding with a canoe and another Marine's musket. He must have been kind of an imposing figure, I think, because those Marines, you know, they were trained. John was wounded in several places by local Aboriginals after frightening them and stealing their food constantly. He escaped from a party of them through a very thick brush when he surrendered himself. Caesar was pardoned for that crime, but he was sent to Norfolk Island. However, Caesar returned to Sydney in 1793. Still incorrigible, he took up his former practice of subsisting in the woods by plundering the farms and huts at the outskirts of towns. He was soon found again, he was severely flogged, and it wasn't the first time. Caesar then became a hero in the colonies. He seriously wounded the notorious Aboriginal Pemulwuy, hopefully I said that correctly, and he was proclaimed a hero throughout the colony. Caesar then escaped again in 1795. He must have got hungry again. Yikes. This time he formed a gang, and this is where he becomes our first bushranger. He formed a gang of fellow runaways, and a reward, this was huge at the time, of 5 gallons of rum was announced on the 29th of January, 1796 for his capture, dead or alive. Notwithstanding the reward that had been offered for apprehending Black Caesar, as he was known, he remained at large, and scarcely a morning arrived without a complaint being made to the magistrates of a loss of property, usually food, supposedly to have been occasioned by Black Caesar. In fact, every theft that was committed at this time was ascribed to him, and I'm not sure that he actually did them all. John Caesar ended up being murdered by a bounty hunter. It was reported that Black Caesar had been shot by one man called Wimbo. This and another man, allured by the reward, had been for some days in quest of him. Finding his haunt, they concealed themselves that night at the edge of a brush which they'd seen him enter at dusk. In the morning, he came out. Wimbo fired upon him and shot him, and he died a few hours later in a nearby cottage. Thus ended a man who certainly during his life had given more trouble than any other convict in the settlement. And that was John Caesar, our Black Caesar, our very first bushranger. Good morning, Nicole. Hey, Rob Kent. It's nice to see you. Maybe the Hamburglar, yeah. Well, he did steal a barrel of pork once, I read. Number 2 is the female convicts flash mob. In September the 28th, 1798, disturbing reports arrived in London of the degrading treatment of female convicts sent to the first colony in New South Wales. Descriptions of dreadful scenes upon convict vessels arriving in port. The decks of the boats, nobody even disembarked, were crowded with both settlers and male convicts alike, picking and choosing the women. And this is a quote, as though they were no more than sheep or cattle. Some settlers want women for servants or wives, while the convicts were just looking for women. Women not chosen on the spot were taken in open boats up the river to the settlement of Parramatta. Poor Parramatta got the seconds, but poor women, really, where another selection process would take place. Those not chosen for particular purposes were then given the free will to go with whichever man they chose or that they prefer. Those who didn't go with one man were assigned to take care of huts. So they were rationed amongst the colony. And there was anything from 2 to 10 men in these huts. So it wasn't very nice. There was no chance for them to live moral for the time lives then. Considering what they endured, it is understandable that convict women didn't always appreciate being judged as having loose morals. They didn't have any choices. In Tasmania, at the Van Diemen's Land then, at the Cascade Female Factory in 1838, I actually just went past that not long ago, the moralising became too much for the women and they decided to make a point. The governor of Van Diemen's Land visited the factory and attended a service in the chapel. Now, there's something wrong with this reverend, I think, in history, because they really focused a lot on this guy during their stay at this female factory. The service was given by Reverend William Bedford, who was a morals campaigner whose hypocrisy had elicited the lady's scorn. Keen to impress the governor with a fine speech, Bedford addressed the women from a highly elevated dais. Then 300 women turned around and simultaneously mooned him. This is how it was documented. The 300 women turned right around and at one impulse pulled up their clothes, showing their naked posteriors, which they simultaneously smacked with their hands, making a loud and not very musical noise. This was the work of a moment, and although constables, warders, etc. were there in plenty, yet 300 women could not all be arrested and tried for such an offence. And when all did the same act at the same time, the ringleaders could not be picked out. Apparently, this cheeky behaviour horrified and astounded the governor and the male members of the party. As for the ladies in the governor's party, it was said, in a rare moment of collusion with the convict women, they could not control their laughter. So it would have been quite humorous, I think. The slappers are still choosing their men in Townsville. Exactly right, Keely Boyd. Lady Scorn. For 300 women to all organise, it must have been bad. Yeah, exactly. Morning, stick man. G'day. Yeah, it was funny. Number 3 is a little bit darker. Um, Alexander the Cannibal. Now, Alexander Pierce, you probably heard about this one. This is a really famous one. Alexander Pierce was transported to Sarah Island in 1822. A month after arriving, he escaped with a Thomas Bodenham, Robert Greenhill, Matthew Travis, and John Mather. The party headed overland towards Hobart. After 15 days without food, they decided to experiment with cannibalism. The men drew straws, and it was Thomas Bodenham who drew the short one. He knelt down and was killed by a blow to the head and subsequently served up for lunch. A week later, John Mather was foraging for roots when a hungry Greenhill crept up behind him and swung at him with an axe. Mather moved and the axe only grazed his head. The two men wrestled and Mather managed to seize control. However, his luck ran out pretty quickly because he'd obviously been chosen as the next on the menu. Determined to eat him, the other 3 ganged up on him and killed him. 4 days later, Travis was fortunately bitten by a snake. So 6 days later, he was on the menu too. This only left Pierce and Greenhill. Now, for a few days of each eyeing the other suspiciously, they'd vowed not to betray each other. Pierce thought Greenhill was lying and so killed him in the dead of the night. However, out of character for Pierce, he left the body untouched. So he kept his end of the bargain. He actually only killed him because he thought he was going to kill him. In 1823, Pierce was recaptured and he confessed to his crimes. He told them all about the cannibalism. Yeah, a bit of long pig. But no one believed him. And he was sent, because it seemed outrageous, he was sent back to Sarah Island. 9 months later, he escaped again. And for provisions, he took with him a Thomas Cox. Imagine him eyeing up all the other prisoners, thinking who he'd like to eat. A few weeks after escaping, a crew of a passing ship saw smoke and Pierce was found. He again confessed to his crimes, but this time he had a morsel of Cox with him to verify his stories of cannibalism. Pierce was taken back to Hobart and hanged on the 19th of July, 1824. The judge at his trial declaring the case was too inhuman to comment on. Why? If I think John Caesar had taken to cannibalism to satisfy his appetite, there would have been no colony left. Imagine if he'd taken to cannibalism, he would have been wiping out every little settlement. Yeah, it's Stickman. Greece gets 300 Spartans. Australia gets 300 slappers. Indeed. Okay, the next one's kind of funny. Number 4 on our list is Billy Hunt the kangaroo. To escape from Port Arthur, convicts had to pass across a narrow isthmus known as the Neck. Today it's called Eagle Hawk Neck. And this is guarded by heavily ferocious dogs and surveyed by stationed military personnel. It was like well lit. It's really narrow. It's really great if you can go down there and have a look. There's like tessellated pavements on either side. It's beautiful. But a convict named George Billy Hunt disguised himself as a kangaroo in the hope of making it past the dogs and through the neck. The plan was actually working brilliantly until the half-starved troopers on duty decided that they were going to have some kangaroo for Tucker, and they tried to shoot him for food. Hunt quickly threw off his rude disguise and surrendered. He received 150 lashes for his troubles. Good try, Billy. That was a cunning plan for sure, and it almost worked. If only those troopers had been better fed. Yeah, there is a movie on it, actually. It's really good because it's a very dark story. You should look into it if you can. I can't remember. I think it's on Netflix, Daz. I think it's just called Van Diemen's Land, maybe. Number 5, this is an interesting one. The Samurai and the Convicts. No one believed William Swallow when he testified that a ship hijacked by mutinying convicts had voyaged across the Pacific to Japan, where the crew encountered samurai. Swallow was a well-known liar, and it's no surprise he wasn't believed. Apart from the story sounding unbelievable, he had at least 5 aliases, changing them regularly to evade capture for various crimes. Swallow first arrived in Van Diemen's Land in 1821, and he was given the convict number 323. In 1829, he was part of a group of men who hijacked the brig Cyprus, an Australian supply ship. He was recaptured in China in 1830, that's like only a year later, and was tried for piracy in a London court. During the trial, Swallow gave a full account of the mutiny and the brig's voyage across the Pacific. He testified, "I crossed the equator and ran north to latitude 38 degrees and made the coast of Japan, being in want of wood and water, and the ship being out of repair and having all her sails nearly split to pieces." Swallow also gave details of the convict crew's week-long encounter with samurai in Japan, but no one believed his story. His claims had long been discredited, like until 2017, his claims were discredited, until Japan-based historian Nick Russell, who I think is an Australian, I'm not sure though, translated part of a samurai manuscript, like I said, in 2017. This was a mystery until then. Mr. Russell compared details in the manuscripts with claims made by Swallow. And he said, "What I'm doing is finding crucial things that just couldn't be there by fluke." Apparently, both Swallow's account and that of Hamaguchi Makita, the samurai chronicler, included eerily similar descriptions of a cannibal striking the hull of a brig, Cyprus. "They opened fire on us and we received a shot between wind and water," Swallow had testified. The samurai account was similar. Commander Mima ordered a fire to be directed at the waterline where the ship was lined with copper. 2 cannonballs hit and the ship shook badly. Comparing the 2 accounts helped Mr. Russell verify the ship in Hamaguchi's manuscripts as the Cyprus. In doing so, he found the missing piece in one of Australia's greatest convict escape stories, the Cyprus's journey from Van Diemen's Land through the Pacific to Canton. Swallow was a fast talker, and he was found not guilty for the piracy of the Cyprus. Swallow was just transported to Tasmania to serve out the remainder of his original sentence. He made it out like he was the victim and there was nothing he could do against these mutinying convicts. He was later sent to Macquarie Harbour and then later transferred to Port Arthur, where he died on May the 12th, 1834, with no one believing his accounts of a run-in with samurai. He is buried in an unmarked grave on the Isle of the Dead. Let's have a look at what you guys are up to. Yeah, I think it is called Van Diemen's Land. It's worth a watch, definitely. Bye, Rob Kent. Yeah, JP watched it and told me that I should watch it, and it's very bleak. It really does a good job of showing off what the Tasmanian landscape is like. Like, it must. No wonder they called it Hell on Earth, because there isn't a lot of hunting here. You know, it's really small game, like little lizards and frogs and, you know, small wallabies, you know, things like that, and they're sort of few and far between. So, you know, unless you're going to eat an echidna and platypus. Beware, it's very dark and very realistic. It's certainly well worth a look. It's a great show. And in fact, there's another show that was made about a female convict who nearly made it to the list. I think I'm going to have to do another list of these convict stories, because there is just way too many good ones, like way too many. Best eat the tubby ones first. I don't know, Keely. I suppose a bit of pork crackling, a bit of long pig crackling. I don't know. It's disgraceful. We shouldn't be laughing about it, but what are you going to do? All right, let's have a Captain Cook at what's in the news today. Well, the Somerton man has finally been exhumed from his resting place in Adelaide's West Terrace Cemetery, with the police optimistic about the prospects of recovering DNA. Hopefully, we can finally get close to solving the mystery of the Somerton man. It's actually a very interesting story. Prince William, in other news, Prince William has accused the BBC of failing his mother, Princess Diana, and poisoning her relationship with Prince Charles after an inquiry found the journalist for the broadcaster deceitfully obtained an interview with her in 1995. William, who is currently 38, said, "It brings indescribable sadness to know that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear, paranoia, and isolation that I remember from those final years with her." That's heartbreaking. That is sad. Good night, Jodie. We're just getting ready for a day. You finish yours off well. In other Prince William news, ladies all over the world are going wild over a flash of his biceps whilst getting the jab recently. Let's just say William's in good shape. William looks good. I've never had an echidna stick man. They're just so beautiful, though. Today in history, May the 21st, in 1809, the Battle of Aspern-Essling, Austrian Archduke Charles beats Napoleon and his army, Napoleon's first defeat in 10 years. On May the 21st, in 1927, aviator Charles Lindbergh, in the spirit of St. Louis, lands in Paris after the first solo air crossing of the Atlantic. Also on May the 21st, but in 1932, after flying 17 hours from Newfoundland, Amelia Earhart lands near Londonderry, Northern Ireland, becoming the first transatlantic solo flight by a woman. Yeah, the Anzacs is really good. JP just recently watched it on Anzac Day with our boys. It was great. It's a classic. You should certainly watch it. My pick for 3 historical characters to spend an evening with are tonight fueled with from my, I'm a curious kind of cat and I get curious about mysteries and I want them solved. Okay, so tonight my pick is the Somerton man. The Taman Shud case, also known as the mystery of the Somerton man, is an unsolved case of an unidentified man found dead in 1948 on the Somerton Park beach just south of Adelaide. And I've been curious about him for a very, very long time. So I'm actually quite interested to see what they can do with their modern forensics. I would also invite the Tolland Bog man. He was a naturally mummified corpse of a man who lived during 4th century BC, but I've always been intrigued by him too. And finally, I would invite Amelia Earhart, who disappeared July the 2nd, 1937, near Howland Island in the Central Pacific Ocean. Maybe I could quell some of my curiosities. Maybe I could find some answers. I don't know, Stephen Webb. It's such an interesting case, I think. Is it, Daz? That doesn't even surprise me that your nickname would be Dundee. I think it suits you. I don't know. I'm very, very interested to know what happened to the Somerton man. And the Tolland Bog man is worth a look at too. He's so well preserved. Anyway, as always, it has been absolutely wonderful to share Smoko with you all. Please leave a thumbs up below the screen and subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to ding my little bell for notifications of all my future uploads. And please consider sharing this so we can grow this community into a bigger one and I can reach 500 subs and finally get off my L plates and onto my P plates. That would be great. That's my goal. Thank you so much for watching. Say good day in the comments or suggest a subject for a future video. I hope you can join me at the same time next week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, you know, full of joy and laughter and lots of fun. All right. I love you all. Bye. See you later.